And this is largely, so in the case of UNDRIP, what's happening now is that things like stumpage fees, where what happens is corporations do logging on Crown land. For every tree, they pay the government a certain amount because the government's the landowner. Now, because the Aboriginal organization is also seen as being a landowner, they get some of that stumpage fee, those stumpage fees. And that's being negotiated all the time. And DRIPA has made that more prominent. What happens there is people say, well, that's a good thing because, this means that Aboriginal groups are getting this funding, which then they're going to be able to use to support, the marginalized members and all this. But that's not what that money goes for. No. So the government of Canada still has to fund Aboriginal groups to deal with the marginalized members, but it doesn't have the stumpage fees that it would be getting to help it to do that. So you're just taking away the tax base, which was used to provide services to all British Columbians, is now no longer. So this is so that's generally what's been happening with DRIPA. But we have the corporations and who owns the corporations, all these kinds of questions. That's what's got to be studied in terms of what's happening internationally with this. But we definitely do know DRIPA undermines Canadian sovereignty, undermines British Columbia sovereignty. That's a fact.
Yes.
Now, what that's going to actually mean in terms of the powers that come in and start, influencing the Aboriginal organizations is an open question, which needs to be examined.
Yes. But
that's what I would say.
Right. But the point that I wanted to make for the viewers is that the reason why this whole Aboriginal schools narrative and questioning it and finding the truth about it matters is because it's being used to fuel that fire.
Exactly.
Of UNDRIP.
Exactly. Well,
which, as you correctly point out, is, I would say, currently the greatest threat to our sovereignty in this country.
Yeah, it's definitely a threat to Canadian sovereignty and British Columbia sovereignty. It loosened people up. So this and UNDRIP, the Canadian legislation, was being resisted by, I think, 5 provinces, and also the Conservatives were resisting it. So it would have had problems in the Senate going through. But with this quote unquote discovery, everyone was on there. Everyone was, what can we do? What can we, the 215 children murdered and put in mass grave. What can we do? This is obviously terrible. And everyone was kind of almost in shock. Like, that's kind of what happened. Is that, because I'd been studying this, I was well aware of the genocide argument. I was like, I and a group of, I did an event with Brian Giesbrecht, Rodney Clifton, and Paul Viminitz, and I think it was on July 10th, 2021. And we were saying, hey, wait, we don't know what's going on here. We need to hold back, wait for the evidence. This could be an abandoned cemetery. Like, we don't know what this is about. But that's because we had been studying this issue for a number of years and investigating the truth and reconciliation kind of rhetoric that was going on. So we were already, sort of had a little bit of, sort of skepticism about these kinds of claims, but almost everyone else in Canada was just, vulnerable to this kind of, and it's psychological manipulation.
Yes.
It's what it is. And this is what's going on all the time. And it's not just the Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal relations